Right. I think we've got some people joining us. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Good Governance Academy's event. It's a book lounge event. And today we are talking to the author, Helle Bank Jorgensen. I'm just going to leave it a little bit longer for people to come online. If you have got some time, please tell us in the chat where you're from. I know we have registrations from across the world. We have, let's see, who's going to be first in the chat? Can you see the chat? If you have any problems with audio or video, the video you probably have to log out and log in again. If you have any audio problems, then I suggest you use a headset because that sometimes helps with the bandwidth. I see we have Johannesburg here. I hope you're not disturbed by the thunderstorm. So I know that the colloquium, our sixth colloquium on the 18th, we had some disturbances with the thunderstorms in Johannesburg. So we also see we've got Malaysia, Rwanda, very nice, Seamus in London. Thank you very much, everyone, for being online. I'm just going to give it another couple of minutes. We've got Botswana, Norway, Turid. Athens. Hi, Theo from Athens. We've got Eswatini, so that's formerly known as Swaziland in Southern Africa. So that's Mandla. Welcome. South Africa again, Northwest, the UK. And the weather's great in Johannesburg. That's good to know. I wonder if anyone in Canada is awake yet. Helle, do you think anyone from Toronto is on yet? You're awake. Then we have Cork Island. Welcome, Sean. Or Sean. Welcome, everybody. And Copenhagen. So fabulous turnout today from all over the world. I've given it 2 minutes. I think I need to kick it off now. So I'd like to welcome Helle Bank Jorgensen of Competent Boards. She's the Chief Executive Officer of Competent Boards. And she's going to be talking today to us about her new book, Stewards of the Future. So Helle is our author. And online, we also have Professor Mervyn King, who is patron of the Good Governance Academy and knows all about the requirements of Stewards of the Future. So it should be a good discussion today. If you want to have a look at any reading, any other suggested readings, have a look at our recommended reading on the website. We have got the book lounge event for the Stewards of the Future, and you're also able to go and buy the book there. So if you click on the link, you can buy the book. And I think, Helle, maybe if you can just tell us, is the book available or is it still pre-publishing now? Are we hot off the press?
It is still pre-publishing. It should have been on yesterday, but I think there's something we all know at the moment as supply chain issues. So even I only have a piece of paper.
Oh dear. But I see Amazon is saying January 2022. So we should be able to.
Yeah, well, the ebook should be able or should be there next week now, they say, but the hard copy in January.
Great. We have got one from Vancouver. Excellent. So welcome. So welcome, everybody. I'm going to hand over now to Helle to just talk us through a little bit about her book and the background to writing of the book. Thank you, Helle. Over to you.
Well, thank you, first of all. And I see Vancouver, that's 5 a.m. So good morning to Vancouver, and good afternoon, and perhaps good night to some of you that I saw also from I think I saw Malaysia, etc. So thank you all of you for joining us, and thank you, Carolyn, thank you, Mervyn, for hosting this book lounge for me. I'm so proud. I'm honored. I'm grateful. Yeah, beyond words, I think I also put out in my LinkedIn post that you will do this for me, to have the world's most renowned godfather of good governance, Professor Mervyn King, review and recommend Stewards of the Future, a guide for competent boards, is beyond imagination. So let me give you a short introduction to the book. The book received a lot of fantastic reviews that, of course, I'm very grateful for, and it's very humbling. It's my real first book, but it's also very, very encouraging. I wrote the book in the hope that more leaders could benefit from the insight than just those that are going through our interactive or self-study competent boards training programs. I know some of those that are on now have been going through the programs. I hope it will be a good reminder of the things that we have done in the program. And I'm, Carolyn, Mervyn, I'm so grateful that you have endorsed the ESG and climate competent board certificate programs. But in terms of the book, perhaps most importantly, I wrote the book because I believe the world needs more ESG and climate competent boards, more leaders that have that insight. So both current and future board members, but also executives, also asset managers. I don't know how many of you have seen, but there was a study coming out from Deloitte not that long ago that shows that audit committees globally found, if you surveyed them, that 60% do not discuss climate on a regular basis when they have their audit committee meetings. And 47% of those audit committee members do not consider themselves climate literate. So as a result, half of audit committees surveyed worldwide said that they do not believe that they are well equipped to fulfill their climate regulatory responsibilities. That's kind of like, let's have that sink in. The other thing, and I think many of you have seen the surveys, including from Tansy Whelan, from New York Stern, from the Sustainability Board report, showing the amount of, or lack of, ESG and climate educated board members. The Sustainability Board report showed the newest that only 8%, so less than 1 in 10 of those directors serving on committees overseeing ESG and sustainability have proven ESG and climate competencies. I think in my mind, the road to a green and brighter future is paved by educating leaders about the impact of environmental and social matters on their company, but also the impact of that company on the environment and society. And not only now, but also in the future. I think we need board of directors who, in my mind, are the most powerful players in a company to have ESG insight and foresight so they can provide oversight. The board of directors do not only hire and fire the CEO, but is also the guardian of the company's long-term success. And that means that we agreeing on the purpose of the business, setting the strategic direction, making informed decisions about what is best for the company and its stakeholders. It certainly means looking after the interests of shareholders, but the responsibility does not stop there. And I think most of us will now say that is the fact, but that's not been what we always have told ourselves. The founder of India's Tata Group noted more than a century ago that in a free enterprise, the community is not just another stakeholder in business, but is in fact the very purpose of its existence. So that's also some of this thinking that you perhaps have heard from Unilever and Paul Pullman also talking about. So in my opinion, the reason many board members do not fulfill these responsibilities is not because they don't want to. I think it's because we lack and we operate with less than adequate knowledge of the consequences of our decisions on the broader community. And the surveys that we just talked about actually tell that story. I think what's fascinating at the moment is that it's no longer people like me that says we need to educate. It's the board of directors themselves that say we need this education. But for decades, shareholder primacy has been the focus of many companies. And many boards have taken most decisions or have taken decision based on short-term financial results rather than long-term cost or long-term benefits that's associated with this broader perspective, this mindset that's much broader than just looking at the next quarter and just looking at shareholders. In the book, I have included an illustration from Limits to Growth. That's a book that came out in 1972. There is the graph in there, and it illustrates that the mindset that we have had put our planet on a trajectory of more pollution, fewer natural resources, a steady decline in food supplies and industrial output. And actually, when you get to see the graph, it also shows a steep rise in death. That charter was published half a century ago, as I said, in 1972. Think about it. We are soon in 2022, 50 years later. I guess we can exchange the illustration with pictures of floods, fires, hunger, pollution. The list goes on. And while Limits to Growth was not on the boardroom agenda back in 1972, the issues that makes the front page around the world today, they are hitting boardrooms as hard as they're hitting us all, right? We are all waking up to the fact that there are limits to growth, at least limits to growth as we know it. And nature is starting to, send us all invoices for it. And these invoices that have been sent by nature have not often been accounted for in our corporate budgets. And we can add to that the impact that nature and the societal consumer trends have on current assets that might turn into stranded assets and therefore a loss instead of an investment in future growth. So when we invest, we hope, of course, that there will be a return on investment. And I think that's important that we also start looking at that. And if that is not enough to deal with, many companies and the board of directors are learning that their growth projections might be overstated because it's getting harder and harder to obtain the supply of material necessary to produce or sell to customers due to resource scarcity. That's why we should start talking about circular economy and some of the other regenerative business models. So, but on a positive note, societal consumer trends are changing to these more environmental and social friendly products and services, or as I was mentioning, Paul Polman before, both Paul Polman and Andrew Winston participating and contributing to the Competent Boards program and are both in the book as well. And they just have another book out, Net Positive, How Courageous Companies Thrive. So there's no surprise that asset managers are also now raising their expectations to the work of the board of directors to ensure that their investments, and thereby the investments that you and I have made for our retirement funds, are managed well. It is not enough anymore that your retirement plan, my retirement plan, is giving good financial returns if we at the same time are destroying the nature, or for some golf courses, that you are hoping to enjoy with your children, with your grandchildren when you retire. More and more people I see are realizing that it is not enough to have a big pile of money when we retire. We would like to enjoy our retirement, and the likelihood of that, unfortunately, seems to decrease with every increase in pollution and climate change. So this realization over a few short years means that the work of boards today is so different than just 2 years ago. There are so many new issues hitting the boardroom, and the expectation from stakeholders are growing very fast. So gone are the days where the board members could glance over the strategy and the numbers prepared by the executives and say, well done, let's go for dinner. I think people today understand that the board of directors holds the most powerful and the most influential job. And that comes with responsibilities. A company with a clear vision for its future generally outperforms one that puts short-term results first. And I believe that the board have a pivotal role in keeping it on that track. There's been great graphic out there showing that companies such as Apple and Microsoft and Amazon have a larger market cap than most countries. I read that Apple is richer than 96% of the countries in the world. And if it was a country, it would be the 8th richest country in the world. Think about that. Amazon's market cap is larger than 92% of countries' GDP. I'm quite sure, Mervyn, that must be because you sold your book, a healthy company. But that aside, think about it. We need to think about the board of directors as guardians of stewards of the fortune of millions of people that have invested through their retirement funds in those companies. I argue in the book that those directors have an even more important role than guardians of the future retirement savings of many of us. They also decide how the company should operate. What are the right or wrong policies and actions, and what products and R&D, research and development, the company should focus on. Then they must consider the impact that those products will have, good or bad, on the environment, on consumers, and on the neighbors, both to the production sides, but also what are the wider impact on climate change, biodiversity, and future generations. It is such an important and significant responsibility to bear, but it's also the most important role. And I think we really need to have competent directors, ESG and climate competent directors that can discuss and really take that in and make the informed decisions. So this remarkable role is, well, I could also borrow the word of my host, Mervyn, is to be, I think you say that it's the heart, the mind, and the consciousness of the incapacitated artificial person. Is that right, Mervyn? I think it's something like that. That is this company. It is not the company that does good or wrong. It is the people that work there and their leaders. But how can we expect that leaders make well-informed decisions if we are not well-informed ourselves? Unfortunately, over the years, I have found that few directors have the insight and experience to make these well-informed decisions when it comes to ESG and climate. And how could they? How could we? We didn't learn about it in school, and most of the traditional board education programs have focused, well, not on ESG and climate and human rights and the growing demands and expectations from stakeholders. And that was the simple reason why I decided to take on the work of educating board members, business leaders, asset managers, and why we launched the Competent Boards movement in 2019 during the World Economic Forum. I can tell you at that point, I had the support from Paul Pullman and a few other great leaders. But in general, in 2019, very few people really agreed with me that the board of directors should be ESG and climate competent. Now, 2 years later, so many global leaders have gone through the ESG competent board certificate and designation program, and so many world-renowned leaders such as Mervyn are supporting us with sharing their wisdom, their experience, to help educate and scale the impact of ESG climate competent leaders. The book, Stewards of the Future, is based upon the wisdom and insight and experience of Mervyn, as well as over 100 other renowned board members, board chairs, executives, experts, investors that are sharing their wisdom with the many directors and executives and asset managers that go through the competent board certificate programs. I have also included a bit of my own insight in the book, gained by more than 30 years while I've been working with truly remarkable leaders and the companies that they serve. So I want to thank all the leaders that have helped me. I will not mention all of them that is mentioned in the book here, but I do want to give a special mention to the people that put me on this career path, if I can even call it a career path. I think it's something I've been doing since Leo Alsing, who was a professor at the Danish Technical University, taught me about life cycle analysis and gave me the opportunity to work with the Danish Steelwork to produce the world's first green account, which they included in the annual financial report for 1991. I know I'm dating myself. Also did then the integrated report, but also a thank you to my professor at the business university where I started to become an accountant. And I wrote about how to put the externalities into the financial reports, how to internalize these externalities and their cost into the financial accounting. My professor at that point did not really see that as the big thing, but it sent me out into the world to make it happen. So if there's only one thing, one learning that I think you should take away from the book, and maybe I shouldn't tell you now, but it's actually the wisdom, not of any of those people there that's contributing, but the wisdom of indigenous leaders that can teach us a lot about stewardship through the ancient 7-generation principle that says that decisions we make today should keep the world in a sustainable state 7 generations from now. I think that's very saying. So again, the book is written for board members everywhere who are curious and want to have the competence, confidence, and the courage to be stewards of the future. And I argue in the book that shareholders, not to mention other stakeholders, gain far more value if the company applies this proactive mindset. At its heart, it is a book for all leaders. I can go on, talk a little bit about what it is that the book is covering. It's from the risk and expectation for boards, executives, and investors, how to deal with dilemmas, the sustainable development goals, climate, ESG, but also environmental and human rights issues in the supply chain, diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-corruption, integrity and transparency, responsible use of data, cybersecurity, digital competences, but also tax, investment and pay in an ESG-focused world, shareholder and stakeholder engagement, disclosure, and of course, the future of good corporate governance, where Mervyn is joining us and have also a good part of the book sharing his wisdom. I think my vision of boardroom dynamic is one where the external factors that are quantified, are standardized and embedded into, yes, the corporate balance sheets and income statements. I think we need to start thinking about the meaning behind what we report. Are we reporting dollars and cents, or should we also convey a sense of a company's values? If the transformation that we see all around us now is to take hold, I think that each board of directors needs to define the purpose of the company in society, but it must also define the purpose or put it another way, the purpose of its members. How will the board of directors carry out their responsibility as stewards of a company's future? To me, stewardship is much more than just taking care of the resources under a company's ownership. It also requires directors to consider the impact that their action or lack of action will have on the earth's land, its water, biodiversity, the health and safety of people, also beyond the factory gate. So what does it take for a member of a corporate board to become a steward of the future? I suggest in the book that we start off by asking ourselves, what is the purpose of my work? What would my children, my grandchildren expect? In other words, am I looking to the future or am I clinging on to the past? So the book aims to provide some of the answers to those questions and guide readers to become stewards of the future. And all of those of you who know me know that I am aiming for action in everything and continuous improvement. So it should come as no surprise that the book also includes an exercise that could be used both by board members, but actually also executives and investors. So after each chapter, you find advice and also 10 questions that in the book, and I learned this from Mervyn King, that I suggest that each board member answer. And then I've included an assessment so you can see how well aligned are the different board members, but perhaps also executives, on the view of how well are we doing when it comes to all of these ESG matters. So let me conclude by again saying thank you, Mervyn, thank you, Carolyn, for having me speak today. I'm truly grateful for all your support and again, also the endorsement of both the ESG and Climate Competent Board Certificate program. And thank you again, Mervyn, for your kind words in your review of the book. It means a lot to me. And for those of you who have not seen Mervyn's review, and there are a lot of them on our website, but it's like directors are the stewards of the business information of a company. The stewards of the future need to apply their minds to make judgment calls that are in the long-term best interest of the health of the incapacitated company, of which as stewards, they are the heart, the mind, the soul, and conscious. This book guides a director as to how to be a good steward of a company in our uncertain future. Thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you, Helle. That was a wonderful background in terms of the book. It's not something that you can get from the book. I think you encapsulated and you've given us the story behind the story. So thank you very much for that. Really appreciated that. But Mervyn, if I can ask you then to maybe expand on your quote and just expand in terms of what your sense of stewards of the future is all about.
Well, thank you very much, and Helle, well done on the book, and I hope it eventually gets published. Yes, you did quote me correctly in my review. Let me start by saying this, that directors are stewards. Stewardship means, as you've already said, to take care. But to take care of not only that which is tangible, but also that which is intangible. And what shareholders to this day, some of them do not appreciate, is that they don't have corporeal rights to a company. They're incorporeal. For example, a shareholder cannot remove a pencil out of the company. It would be a theft. The shareholder, when we still had cash registers, couldn't dip their fingers into the till and remove $5. It would be a theft. So this myth that we have unfortunately settled throughout the 20th century, that the shareholders were the owners of the company, was as I said, a myth. Shareholders have no duty or responsibility to the company, and the company do not have a special duty to the shareholders. Unfortunately, they were given primacy of place amongst other stakeholders during the 20th century, but the outcome was disastrous, because what we had was a century of unsustainable development, because the majority of the improvement of bottom line on the basis that the criteria for success was increased profit, increased dividend, increased share price. If you achieved that, it was a successful company. But most of those profits of most of those companies were subsidized by society and the environment. And the very purpose for which this artificial, incapacitated person was formed was
Oh dear, have we lost Mervyn? Are you on, Helle? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Well, should we just wait for Mervyn to come back on again? I've got some questions for you.
Let's,
Can we do that? Are you ready for my questions?
I'm ready.
So you're calling the book A Guide for Competent Boards, but it's a question really. Do you believe that we have incompetent boards?
Oh, Carolyn, you're not the first that asked me that question. Of course, I mean, we have so many fantastic leaders that have risen through the ranks and are very, very competent. But I do believe, oh, good, Mervyn. Then yes. You can, I can think about your question, Carolyn.
Oh, good, okay. All right, thank you. Sorry about that, Mervyn. Welcome back.
Sorry, my Wi-Fi somehow went off. So what I was saying is that shareholders have no duty or responsibility to the company. But the concomitant of this right of limited liability and having no liability to creditors or to the employees if the business of the company fails is that on bankruptcy, they're at the back of the queue or the line when it comes to the payment of any residual value out of bankruptcy. First of all, the creditors are paid, preferred creditors, secured creditors, concurrent creditors, and if there's any residual value, then the shareholders. So it is something always that I've debated with people, because around the world, for example, I think, Helle, you know this push for shareholders to have a say on pay. Well, it's interesting that the less money paid to employees, the more money that'd be available for dividends. So there's actually a conflict of interest. And yet people still talk about say on pay by shareholders. Why? Why the shareholder? Why give them that primacy of place to determine a critical issue, which is remuneration? Stewardship is to take care not only of assets, intangible and intangible, corporeal, incorporeal, but also to take care of business judgment calls made. In making a business judgment call, is the board clear and its collective mind ensures that, objectively speaking, it has all the facts on which to make a decision? If not, the steward should adjourn the meeting and make sure that the board has all the facts. Secondly, as a steward, you should have no financial interest in that issue, either you or a related party to you. Thirdly, the law is not an ass. The law knows that directors do not have crystal balls. Directors have to make decisions on uncertain and unknown future. No one could have predicted the GFC, but it happened. So in making business judgment calls, what the law expects of the steward is that he or she makes a rational business decision at that time in those circumstances. So when 4 years after that business decision, it turns out to be incorrect and harmful to the company, theoretically, the company has a cause of action against those directors and those stewards. But if the stewards can show that at that time, in those circumstances, it was a rational business decision with the wisdom of hindsight, they actually, in law, escape liability. And let me point out to everybody online that that doctrine was started some 50, 60 years in Delaware in the United States of America, and then filtered right through the world and is included in our Corporations or Companies Act as it's known locally. So the good steward is a steward not only of corporeal and incorporeal matters, but also of the very decisions, the business judgment calls made by the company. He or she has to ensure that that business judgment call is creating value, but in a sustainable manner, in a resource-constrained world, but increasing population, and trying to give some color and to the answer to a question with which I've battled for 3 decades. Can we have infinite growth on a finite planet? Answer that question. Very difficult to answer that question. And yet, what is expected? It is expected that the company continues to grow. Is that correct? Should companies survive no matter what? The answer is, in my view, in the negative. Market forces must act, must take control of the situation. So value creation is important, but there were some seminal events towards the end of the first decade of the 21st century, the collapse of Lehman Brothers and the GFC. And suddenly we, and I include myself, then being chair of the United Nations on Governance and Oversight and chair of the Global Reporting Initiative, we saw sustainability issues and good stewardship to mean that we looked at the impacts which arose on the 3 critical dimensions for sustainable development: people, planet, and prosperity, the economy, society, and the environment. What were the activities of the company, and what were its outputs, its product, and its waste? When it goes out into society, what impact was it having? Was it positive or was it negative? If it was negative, was the company actually developing a business model and a strategy to eradicate or ameliorate those negative impacts? Because as an asset manager or as a trustee of your pension fund, I would owe you a duty to make sure that that company was doing it. Were they acting as good stewards for the future? Because if they didn't take account of that here were negative impacts on the environment, and yet there was no strategy to eradicate or ameliorate that, they were not taking care, and they were not stewards. So one of the critical factors of a good steward is intellectual honesty. The honest application of mind and the ability to actually rid one's mind of one's present needs and past experiences. And actually clear your mind of the inputs, maybe from a major shareholder or a major customer. And then cross this Rubicon of intellectual honesty into an arena where you focus your mind on making a decision in the best long-term interest of the health of the company. This incapacitated artificial person, which is the most important citizen in the developed and developing world, because it is the platform on which we raise capital and we create jobs. And who is the steward? The directors. And they are caring about the future. And we need to make sure to arrive at value, which is not only increasing profit at any cost, the free part of Milton Friedman's free economy was the subsidization by society and the environment to that bottom line. That's what happened. That was the only free part of his free economy theory. So we have to make sure as stewards that we take all these matters into account. We must make sure when we get offered an appointment as a director that we do a due diligence on the company. What is that company? Is the company acting as a responsible corporate citizen? What is its business model? Has it actually embedded the SDG pertinent to the business of the company, as conservation of water would be pertinent if the business was the brewing of beer? Is it that? Is there a director on board that has some cloud hanging over his or her head? Do I join it, and as a collegiate, I get tainted? So you have to do a due diligence on the company. But likewise, the company has to do a due diligence on you, who's about to be appointed. What is your level of integrity in the community in which the company operates? What is your reputation? Are you a person who will be a good steward of the future of that company? So it's absolutely important. Competency is one thing, but does he or she have the capacity to actually take on the stewardship role for this artificial and incapacitated person that's so dependent on the steward, heart, soul, mind, and conscience-wise? There is no company that commits a wrong. It's an innocent, artificial, incapacitated person. The same as a 1-month-old baby. No one would accuse the baby of doing something wrong. But the parent who should be taking care of that child could do something wrong. The same thing when a company is seen to be doing something wrong. The wrath of society mustn't turn against the company. It must turn against those corporate leaders, those stewards who haven't made a right decision, haven't applied their minds in an intellectually honest basis, learned and understood, as you point out in the book, the needs, interests, expectations, and concerns of the various stakeholders, and knowing there will always be a trade-off between those stakeholders when making a decision in the long-term best interest of the health of the company, which is dependent on you because you are the mind of the company. And a good steward will make sure that he or she understands what is going on around him or her. He or she will not be embarrassed to have Helle and Carolyn sitting on his left and his right. If he doesn't understand, the good steward taking care will say, I do not understand. Explain this to me, because he is the mind of the company. And if he doesn't really understand this and he makes a decision, he's actually committing a fraud on this innocent company. So he or she's got to act responsibly, because external stakeholders particularly will look at the conduct of those directors and ask the question, are they acting responsibly? Is this a responsible corporate citizen? And accountability is critical. How do we account? The lifeblood of accountability is how we report. And reporting, as you point out in the book, Helle, integrated thinking is absolutely critical. Exactly what happened between you and your professor in Denmark, with respect, he was wrong. You were right. And I've been saying since 1992 that none of these issues must be looked at in silos. You cannot separate financial capital from intellectual capital, from human capital, from natural capital. These things, including the relationship between the company and stakeholders and the stakeholders of the company, are integrated 24/7. And therefore, the supreme authority in the governance architecture of this artificial incapacitated person, the board, must make up its mind that it's going to report on this integrated basis and explain to you, the user, in clear, concise, and understandable language, what the true value to society of the business of this company is. Because if it's not adding value to society, then society is subsidizing it, or the environment is subsidizing it. And it's a matter of fairness that you understand the needs, interests, and expectations or concerns of stakeholders, particularly in the pandemic, where we have to deal with health and safety. And we know the hardships suffered by employees, for example. So you need this collaborative, integrated approach in making sure that you make compromise decisions with your stakeholders. Likewise, the stakeholders have to realize the company has had challenges. So let me conclude by saying this, Helle, that you've done something which is worthwhile in writing this book. Because if nothing else, you've pointed out to every director that he or she is a person who's taking care of the tangible, the intangible, the corporeal, the incorporeal, and this artificial person that's so dependent on them, heart, mind, soul, and conscience. Thank you.
Wow, there's lots of questions to come out of there. Thank you very much. Before, when you dropped off, I was asking Helle a difficult question, but I'm going to ask another question about you talking about the company and this artificial person, and Helle's talking about the stewards, and you putting the two together, but you've both written different books. Helle's now written The Stewards of the Future, and our last book launch was your book, Mervyn, on the healthy company. So maybe I'll go to Helle first. Helle, how do you see these two books working together?
I mean, they fit together, and I learned so much from Mervyn, so that should be no surprise in that. But I do think, as Mervyn was just pointing out, to have a healthy company, and I was so grateful for actually facilitating that discussion with you and Lee about the book. To have a healthy company, you need to have the minds and the hearts, etc. You need to have the mindset of the directors to make sure that company is not only healthy today, but also healthy tomorrow. It's like your child, right, growing up. You want to make sure that it's not just right now, but also tomorrow, also when that child is growing up. As one of the other contributors to the book is saying, it's not enough to say, oh, I knew that might go wrong. You want to do the best for that child. And that child is the company, and you want that company to be healthy.
Thank you, Helle. Absolutely. So in line with the stewards and the company, Mervyn, do you have anything you'd like to add to that, or have you said it in your previous comments?
No, Lee Roberts and I called it the healthy company because we, the corporate world, and directors of today, the stewards of today, have moved away from this focus on a particular stakeholder, namely the shareholder, the primacy of the shareholder, which, as I pointed out, was disastrous from a century of unsustainable development, and arriving at using natural assets faster than nature was regenerating them, complete disastrous situation. And it's simply because people lost sight of the fact that directors, similarly, when the artificial company was formed in the middle of the 19th century, the limited liability company, there were no rules as to how directors should behave, but the guardianship of incapacitated people was already, the law was well developed. And what was that? That guardians had to act loyally, in good faith, with care, skill, and diligence. And is it strange? No, it's not. It was a matter of logic that became the duties of directors. Because why? What was the common denominator? Incapacity. The company is an incapacitated artificial person, whereas the guardian of incapacitated persons were actual individuals, but they were incapacitated.
Thank you. I want to Helle's had enough time to think now. So your book, Helle, you say it's about competent boards, but then that's an assumption that there are incompetent boards, right? So we're hearing about this incapacitated person. Tell us a bit about incompetent or incompetent boards.
I do not hope that we have incompetent boards. I do believe we have board members, and we know now that board members are saying that themselves, that need the insight, they need the foresight when it comes to climate, ESG, human rights, all of those other areas that I'm writing about in the book, and the whole reason for actually writing the book, to ensure that we have that insight. I've said many times that it's hard to make informed decisions if you're not informed. And if you're not informed, well, you can say you're incompetent. That does not mean that hopefully that these board members, they know a lot of other things. So I want to add to that knowledge. I want to ensure that we have board members that's both curious, but also serious about what are all of these areas that's hitting the boardroom. Want to make sure that they not only have a cheat sheet of here are the questions that they can ask others, or here are the answers to the asset managers, but actually understand, actually can articulate, have the confidence in what is the transition plan for this company, what's the budget, how are we going to do it, so that we can all have trust. And I'm going back to the fact that, yes, these companies, and I admire board of directors that serves of these companies, there's lots of dilemmas that we need to look at. But we need to make sure that we look at those dilemmas and make the best decisions, not only for the shareholders, not only for a few stakeholders, but so we have a healthy company, to use Mervyn's words in the book.
Thank you, Helle. You've got a question to Helle. I'm going to just open up and allow you to talk. Would you mind asking us your question?
Yes, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Carolyn. Good afternoon, Helle, and good afternoon, Mervyn. Thank you very much for such an insightful conversation that we are attending. Yeah, the question is, with this new inception of directors, especially for the previously disadvantaged communities, how well do you assist the new guys that are coming into the fore, into these directorship positions, board of directors positions? Does your book also covers those new guys that are coming up, or it only covers the guys that have well experienced within the sectors of our communities? Thank you.
I hope it is for all current and future leaders. I hope it is for you. I hope you might have that insight for a lot, but can learn from some of the other leaders that are contributing to the book. I think one of the things I've said a lot is that we have two ears. We need to put the ears to the ground. We need to hear what I'm looking at two youth on the screen here, but we need to listen to the youth. I think we need to make sure that we say, yes, wisdom. We all need wisdom also to serve at the board of directors. But wisdom is also to listen to what it is that both the current and the future want. And whatever we want it or not, future generations are the future. So I hope the book is for you. I hope it's for everyone that wants to be a steward of the future.
Thank you, Helle.
May I just echo that, Karen, that what Helle said. The Healthy Company, written by Lee Roberts and me, does exactly that. There's not a presumption that the director is a chartered accountant or experienced corporate lawyer or whatever. But the board, as a collegiate and as a common mind in thinking, unified collective mind in thinking, needs various skills. For example, in a construction company, one would need a quantity surveyor, better to have one. One would need someone that has construction skills, an engineer, etc. But you might have someone that has no tertiary education, but has spent 20 years in the construction business and has built a successful construction company. That's a person who's had the wisdom of actually running his or her own company, steering it, because the word director comes from the Latin word to steer, been steering it to be a successful, healthy company, and has had the foresight and the thinking where he or she has put his or her money into the capital of the company to steer that company to be a healthy company for the benefit of all his or her stakeholders, the company's stakeholders. And you don't have to be a person with a degree, but you can have that experience. But then you've got to understand that you've got to approach this with intellectual honesty. And that's why there are many family businesses that I've advised over the years to actually get non-executive directors on their boards, because they start thinking in a tunnel, as it were. And you get that outside thinking coming into the board, so that when you make that business judgment call, which is one collective mind making that decision, you've got inputs to hopefully arrive at a better business judgment call, a more informed one than you would have without those skills. So absolutely, the healthy company and Helle's book, I think they fit like a horse and carriage, if I may say so, using Frank Sinatra's words. They do fit like a horse and carriage. And read both of them, and it'll be instructive not only for the experienced director, but for the novice director. And the GGA, which I conceived about 2 years ago, was to marry SDG 4, quality education, with SDG 17, collaboration. And I chose Carolyn as my chief executive, knowing that she's got expertise in governance, and she's a computer scientist, and she's a very good moderator. And as the chief executive of the organization. And if I may say so, I made a very good choice. And has done and is doing a wonderful job. And the purpose of the GGA is actually to educate our educators. So the young people coming out with MBAs and CAs and LLBs out of our universities are educated about the very things that Helle and I have been talking about.
And if I may, and I love that steering, right? So many of us, if we are out driving a car, we don't just look in the mirror up here or up at the end. We actually look out into the front. Yes, you can be informed by what happened last year and the years, but that does not necessarily be what's happening in the future. So make sure that you have that insight of what have happened, but also the foresight of what happens, and make sure that you know when to press the brake, but also when to press the speeder.
Thank you, Helle. I think that when we're discussing these matters in terms of the incompetent boards and that question around the new directors, I think the new directors coming on are maybe more attuned to the fact that they not necessarily have the skills, and they may be more open to learning new skills as opposed to the people who have been there for many, many years. And it is those people that we want reading your book to open themselves up to new skills, to be able to learn these, old dog, new tricks, isn't it? I also like to say that when I talk about companies and that incapacitated person, like sending your children to school, you don't send your children to school just to pass their exams. You actually send them to school to do their best. And I'd like to say that reading this book is about them doing their best, as opposed to just ticking the box and passing legislation, and meeting a compliance obligations, because we can no longer afford to just meet the compliance obligations. We have to actually do our best now. We all have to do our best and collaborate. But Sorry, now I've gone off. Thank you very much. I know we're out of time now. There are some more questions about greenwashing. I'm sure this conversation will carry on. But if you can all have a look at the website, Helle's book is up there on recommended reads. The courses she mentioned are recommended courses. So please go and have a look and carry on the conversation on YouTube. This has been live streamed to YouTube. Subscribe, like, and comment there, and we'll come back to you. So thank you very much, everyone. And thank you, Helle, and thank you, Mervyn, for your time today.
Thank you,
And
Karen,
thank
for
you,
your moderation.
Thank you, everyone.
Goodbye,
Bye.
everyone online. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, Helle. Bye.
Bye.